Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Last Guardian walkthrough, and this is the finale of it. We're going to be battling through some shitty fights to get to quite an interesting spectacle at the end, and then taking on the final scenario. I have a compromised voice, so I'm going to sound a bit weird. I'm going to have like breaks in my voice when I speak, and all kinds of fun things to look forward to. And we're going to spend this entire episode talking about Gurren Lagann, which is an anime, if you're not familiar. It's called something like Topper Tenren Gurren Lagann, which is, what is it, Pierce the Heavens Gurren Lagann, something like that. It's something they say at the end of the anime. But a lot of people have told me to watch this, and I've not watched it, and I didn't realise it came out in 2007, so it's been out a while. But this is an anime that I really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed it because I feel it told its story way better than anime generally does today. I'm not a snob by any means when it comes to my my predilections for the old anime, but suffice to say I watch a lot of them, more recent ones, and I find them to be kind of stupid. They're all generally the same kind of thing. They all generally follow the same kind of rhythm, and a lot of it is chaos. I'm not a big fan of throwing you into a universe, giving you very little narrative, giving you very little exposition on exactly where you are, very little world building, very little character development, and then just the standard Jap animation silliness until the end where it gets a little bit serious and then the main character might die, or they'll fight some big boss thing and then it's over with and you got no answers. And that's pretty much 90% of the anime I've tried to watch more recently, after things along the lines of Outlaw Star and Trigun and Hellsing and Cowboy Bebop, and, you know, insert those kind of titles. So Gurren Lagann is not by any means the best anime I've ever seen. It's very standard in a lot of ways, but I think it does wonderful storytelling. And I'm going to take you through a little bit of it without spoiling too much, but at the same time, if you are interested in not having this spoiled, you might want to just skip this video. Or mute it if you need the video for the guide. Because I'm going to talk about the characters, I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to be a little bit vague so that it doesn't spoil too much. But this has been around a while and you've probably already seen it, hopefully, so you can understand what I'm talking about. But the beginning of this anime is really, really important, but at the same time it's kind of shit. Sounds weird, doesn't it, already? That's why I like it so much, I think. So at the beginning there are two characters introduced. There is the Simon, however they bloody say his name, who is this little kid who likes to drill, who's part of this settlement of people who live in a pit, which is essentially some kind of mine or cave underground where they kind of just dig to try and coexist with their situation. They never go to the surface because the surface is kind of, you know, that place that shall not be named, because a lot of people don't think it exists, and it's just kind of this sheltered, like, post-apocalyptic race of people just getting by. Simon has a friend who calls him bro, who's called Kamina, who's this kind of super arrogant, super confident, stereotypical anime hero kind of character. He's very, very big on being grandiose, he's got very florid speeches, and he's just kind of that fun, happy-go-lucky hero figure that a lot of anime has. And he's the perfect archetype for it. So with the combination of these two, they end up getting into some trouble, and something happens where this robot ends up dropping into their pit and puts them in peril, so they have to kind of fight back and win this situation. And as they do so, they meet a new friend, which is the fan service lady of the program, and they end up going to the surface and realizing that they live on a planet that has a surface. And then from there, it's kind of a systematic increase in set-piece spectacle and development of its world. And at the beginning, it's kind of just standard, nothing too interesting, but the way this program builds its spectacle is probably the best I've seen in a very long time. Because it does wonderful pieces of contrast, and the contrast is, at the time, maybe not too appreciable. It's not the easiest thing to appreciate, because it does seem kind of underwhelming, kind of small. Like Gurren Lagann is kind of this head with arms and legs, and it looks a bit silly, and it's taking on these beast men who are in these other robots, and they kind of look a bit silly, and it's very subdued, it's very Japanesey and mecha and that kind of stuff. But by halfway through this season, it has gone from being this small band of people, these three people who have realised that there is an entire world above them that doesn't have a ceiling, to leading a resistance army against the capital of the planet, who is essentially has this tyrannical hold, forcing people underground to make sure that their numbers never exceed a certain amount, because this prophecy will come true of ruination. And the way they do it is just, it's incredible, it really is. And what happens in this anime is just anime 101. There's an episode where they go to a hot spring and all he wants to do is see the girl's boobs, and it's hilarious because it reminds me of the one from Outlaw Star, which reminds me of the one from every anime ever, because there's always going to be that moment. But the way they tie it together to building things is really, really great. And then they do something that no anime really does in my experience. They kill off a main character. And it comes out of nowhere. And it's this weird thing that is both amazing and annoying at the same time, because they killed my favourite character. And I never saw it coming, because I thought it was just going to be that kind of stereotypical anime. And they got rid of it. Just boom, dead. And it was the best thing that could have happened to it, even though personally I kind of wished that it had not happened. Because it forced all these people that it had introduced, and it was introducing people quite quickly without explaining who they were and giving them too much backstory, other than, this is this dude, this is his sisters, this is that dude, this is these people, this is this. It was all very quick, it was all very cavalier, and you wondering at the time, like, is there any point to this, or are they just building this resistance faction of humans against these beastmen? And they're introducing these people subtly, and instead of taking the time to go into all the detail of it, they drop this emotional bombshell that brings them all together in this one collective mourning. And then it's this moment of, you stop looking at them as individuals and you look at them as this unit because they've lost their leader, effectively. Spoiler alert, of course. And then after that, you're just like, how the hell can this continue? Where's this gonna go? I don't get where this is gonna go. There was that thing at the beginning. Like, how, what? Come on now, there's a little glimpse at the beginning of how this was going to escalate. It was a beautiful teaser, and fantastic how they did it. And then it keeps building. And it builds from this, and it builds from this. And by the end of it, they're in, like, the 9th dimensional of space, having a massive space galactic battle with hundreds of these robots against hundreds of these other robots, with pink explosions and shit kicking off, and massive grandiose speeches, and people saying ridiculous things you just wouldn't say. But the way they built it was so wonderful. I thought it was insane, because I just didn't expect it. And it did it in some really great ways. The first one, of course, as I've mentioned, is it signposts each of these milestones subtly. And in storytelling, this can be difficult to do, because if you give people too much, they'll spot it, and it's not as good. If you don't give them enough, they'll feel cheated. The beginning of that first episode, it showed you a future that comes true. A future that you had very little context to, and then it introduced you to people you thought were a part of it that necessarily weren't. Very clever, subtle, and good storytelling at that point. Then it introduces people who you don't think are going to be significant, but there's a time gap where, like, I think it's 7 years passes. And in any form of media, be it video game, be it any kind of book or film or whatever it is, when you are introduced to a cast of characters which you can grow to enjoy over a period of episode or a period of time, where you know he's this archetype, they're that archetype, they do this purpose, they're the antagonist, protagonist, there's the love interest, there's this, there's that. When you're introduced to those complexities, your brain kind of fills in the blanks until they give you the blanks and you're expecting them. And a lot of shows don't give you the blanks because it's kind of fucking annoying, and they just assume that they've told enough story and they get on with a ridiculous plot that generally goes nowhere, gets all metaphysical and is horrible by the end. This one doesn't. By the way, this puzzle's a fucking nightmare. You've got to shrink this ball until it's really close to touching the central ball but doesn't go inside, because if it goes inside it will swell outwards really fast. If you do it just subtly, it enables you to do this pretty efficiently, but if you don't, it can be a bit frustrating, so don't force it too far inside or it comes back quicker. It kind of rebounds. But Gurren Lagann gave you all of these little signposts, gave you all these little bits of information, let you expect what the answers were going to be, built some character and some world building in it, but not too much, just enough so that the episodes could be their own thing, but you still had a grounding in where you were. And then it does this transition, and then boom, everything has moved on. Everything is different. And you're suddenly curious then of, wow, this is a vastly different world than the one we were in. And they've achieved this in like 10 to 15 episodes. And you can tell that the escalation is just going to keep escalating. And admittedly, towards the end, it does get a little bit batshit crazy. I would say everything post when they attack the moon is a little bit crazy. But it fits in, and it's worth it, because it still has that great sense of scale. But the way that they plot, just how it arcs, is such a gradual yet astronomical ascent. It's amazing. It's really, really well done. And it did nothing too unique. It did so many cliche things, but the way it was delivered, I felt, was so spot on. It made me care about it more than I thought it would. And it made it really interesting. And there's tons of cliched moments, don't get me wrong, folks. There's tons of bits you're going to predict. Because I was predicting most of it all the time, but I was still enjoying it in spite of it. But the way that they signposted things before it happened was great. One of the things I really liked was one of the character who wanted to see the sky, who wanted to get out of this place that they lived in for so long and go see his dad. He, not only when he got outside of this trying to look for his dad and everything, said he was going to see the surface. He got to the surface. Then he set his sights on the moon, and they got to the moon. And then from that point onwards, it was almost like wherever they set their gaze, they would get there. And it was kind of, it's this wonderful story of perseverance and overcoming the odds. And I know every anime does that, and it always kind of, proselytizes to you about the power of friendship. Like every episode of fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it wasn't Yugi that won, it was the power of friendship. It's like, fuck off. And it does get a bit mouthy with that. This never kind of went that way. And there were a lot of instances where it kind of breaks down. And there are people like, certain people that were piloting Gurren Lagann, and you're like, why are these people in this? Why have they been chosen to do this role? And then after the time shift, they're really important. And they're key to certain things that happen. Certain people are married off and paired off. Certain cyclical events keep happening. And one of the great ones that I felt was kind of the foreshadowing of Kamina finding his father. Because if you think about that, completely cyclical again. And cyclical in a way that you didn't expect. And it worked really, really well. And then there's the whole instance of the relationship between the girl and Kamina, where how many animes do you get where people actually act on their feelings? They hardly never do that. It's always that fucking frustrating nerd trying to get the girl, but then they never do, and it never goes anywhere. So the romance is always that fan-servicey bullshit nosebleed stuff, and it never ever becomes anything mature. It never progresses. It's always just a stalemate for the purposes of seeing boobs and bums and things. And don't get me wrong, Gurren Lagann's got lots of like wavy boobs and stuff and bum shots and what have you, which I thought were hilarious, but it's Japanese, what are you going to do? But they acted on a relationship, and it had this really mature moment. It was just a fleeting, and then it's completely dashed in just the most heartbreaking, amazing way that once again gave them a sense of purpose and gave them a sense of unity, which I thought was fantastic in such a quick way of doing it. I really appreciated the writing to it. And then, of course, setting the sights on the moon, there was the girl who came out of the suitcase, very reminiscent of Outlaw Star. And then she was all kind of weird and stuff, and then it built on his character and him finding himself. And then there was the whole notion of the government versus the Supreme Commander and the coup d'etat that was inevitably going to come. And then that interesting friendship that built between Simone and Veril, who had been this person who had been an antagonist through the entire thing, but there was a mutual respect about his piloting skills. So of course in the end he ends up joining them when it becomes more about just saving one species. It's about, saving everything, because it's complete cataclysm. And it kept on notching one step higher. But at no point did it ever go balls to the wall story and forget what fun it was having. So it kept a consistent state of humour, it kept a consistent state of character development, it had an established world. By the end of it you felt like you'd gone through a journey, and there was kind of some closure too, which not a lot of anime offers either. A lot of anime is just like fucking, remember the end of Neon Genesis? It took 2 DVDs to try and explain that bullshit. That's not what you want. We don't want it to be something that ridiculously subjective and what is it, human instrumentality and all that nonsense. You want some closure. You want something to just be like, this is this is that, and kind of end it. And I think they ended really strongly. They ended on a high where it could go anywhere, it could come back, and it could do a lot of things. There's a few things I didn't quite understand, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. Like, the whole wedding ceremony at the end was kind of weird. I think I'd have been a bit more choked up over that. I can't understand being put to death and nobody having a fucking problem with it. I thought that they kind of steamrolled over that part. Like, if it wasn't for Simone, these people would have been subjugated and never known that the sky existed. So you would have thought that he would have earned some fucking credit, but it just showed, didn't it, how fickle people in times of peace and how complacent they can be, that they forget what people have done for them and they forget what life used to be like because they get too cushioned, too mollycoddled. And I think that was a good theme, but at the same time, there's no way some dude's putting me to fucking death and I'm being okay with it. And I think they explained it a little bit afterwards where they were showing the turmoil that he felt, but at the same time, they were using him as an antagonist until the real threat turned up, and I felt like he was a bit too enthusiastic for blood, in my opinion. I think it could have been a little bit more subtle, but I understand why they did it that way. But suffice to say, I would not have been fucking happy. I was pissed. I was pissed at other people letting it happen. Like Ron, you know, the weird gay guy that I'm almost certain Steve Blum voiced? He's one of the best characters in that show. He's fucking hilarious, and he's always like teasing the boys because he's overly gay. He's kind of this overly gay stereotype. He was way too accepting to put Simone to death. Like, what the fuck, man? I was getting more angry than the characters in the show. Like, this is not right, goddammit. But I suppose we needed it to build towards, and there was a couple of other things with the idea of taking the spaceship into space and completely contradicting all the values that somebody was being put to death for. There was a few other things with that, but that was fine. And then another bit that I didn't quite get either, which I was really interested to see, because I was wondering if there was a manga to this, and the manga was more in depth. But when I looked on Wikipedia, which is of course the host of all information, it said that the manga and the anime started very close to each other, so it makes me think that maybe the anime came first, and then they adapted it into a manga, so I don't think that will bear much fruit as we do the final encounter here in Last Guardian. See that? Didn't even touch me and I fell over. Best game ever. So this is really brutal to watch, guys, and it's not very fun for Trico, but it's a state that never proceeds anywhere. He will never ever get fully killed. He will never ever get a fail state for this. You can take as long as you need to take. All you have to do is grab the shield and then go into the center and destroy the core. It's going to take a while because it's all spectacular and beautiful and dramatic, but it's pretty simple stuff. But the other thing I didn't understand, the Spiral King, which I thought was a really, really cool villain, he wasn't developed as well as I would have liked, even though he did come back at the end and gave some much-needed exposition, because where else would they have got it from if they didn't have, you know, revived the Ghost Man with this machine, which I thought was interesting. The fight with him was cool too, really interesting as with that. He had a weird kind of head aura, which reminded me of Yakuza with the heat auras. But he was talking to them before they fought, and he was mentioning how there was one who came before. And I thought that was going to have some real significance, and it was going to have some real... at the end it would be like, ha, this is the thing he referenced to, and boom, here's the bombshell. But I never got a resolution with that kind of vague promise that he made. Was he just referencing to the people who had fought against the anti-spirals in the past, who'd, you know, been shown dissent and gone to war and then ultimately failed? Or was he talking about, like, the leader of the anti-spirals, or himself, or Kamina's dad or something? I didn't quite get what that meant, because it seemed like some really intentional, here's a little bit of a breadcrumb for you to follow, and there's going to be a big thing, and I might have missed it, because once again, I was watching it while playing another game, and just chilling out and vegetating while binge-watching it, but... kind of to bring it all together and to tie it up. Gurren Lagann is a show that starts off incredibly humbly, and it has a great sense of pace, world building, and event scaling that, as I've mentioned, it goes from two friends digging a tunnel, living a tedious life, to fighting for the universe. And there's something in there that just completely resonates with me, because it wasn't done in a way where like, this is too much, this is too fast, I can't keep up with this is just completely losing me. It managed to do it about as gracefully as you can for the speed that it happened, while still telling a story that came together and gave you answers. I watched Kill la Kill recently, and that was another show that is absolutely bonkers the entire time. It's just fucking stupid, but it relishes in its stupidness, and that's what makes it so much fun. And at the end of that, they managed to somehow tie all the insanity into a cohesive story that makes sense. And I think that that should be commended, because if you watch a few episodes of that show, you don't know where it's going. It's kind of the standard school hierarchy. You know, there's the girls, there's the comedic friend, there's the silly family, there's all the tropes that you notice, and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere, and then it kind of does, and it makes way more sense than it had any right to make. And Gurren Lagann is like that, but it's more linear. Like, I think it's a really traditionally told story in a time where anime doesn't tell traditional story. It's usually all over the place and up its own arse a lot and just weird. Whereas this wasn't, and I really appreciated it. So if you're looking for a show to watch, I would recommend it definitely. It was a really, really fun one, and I don't think anything about it stands out at the beginning, but it has this wonderful way of making you care and moving on the story so that you never want to like move away from it. It never gets boring, and I think that's something that a lot of anime struggle with. So this was great. It did have one of those recaps episodes which I absolutely detest, and especially coming after Kill la Kill, where Kill la Kill did it in the intro because it was taking the piss out of the fact that animes like to do this. Here's a recap of everything that happened so far, and I hate the idea that that is something that exists, because it happens all the fucking time. And I'm one of those people that if I want to know what's happened, I will watch the anime again. I don't want you to recap it for me. I appreciate that it's been repeated a million times on Cartoon Network, and we're never going to see how Frieza dies, but no, fuck that episode. So that was the only episode that I can say you should skip, because it was trash. It was just bullshit recapping for no reason. But everything else, absolutely stellar. Really, really liked it. 10 out of 10 IGN. But this is The Last Guardian, and after you've dragged the tail down here, all you need to do is pick it up. Or you don't even have to pick it up, I don't think. I liked trying to aim it towards the sphere, but I think you can just aim and the tail will aim itself. But you'll notice I'm going to be a little more thorough here, trying to turn it a bit. You know, you've got to be proper with these things. And then you aim at this and you end the game. So yeah, how did you feel about The Last Guardian? Was it what you wanted? Was it what you expected? It's definitely something.